Let's get some perspective on this story now. We can speak to Kristine Berzina, a senior fellow with the German Marshall Fund in Brussels. She's an expert on U.S. foreign policy and transatlantic relations. Kristine, thanks for joining us. Let's start with what stood out to you about Joe Biden's speech there. How did it differ from President Trump?
President Biden started his speech by saying that America is back. And really, the speech was a reversion to an America before the age of Donald Trump. It was a very values-based speech. First of all, coming to the State Department, coming and reaching a hand directly to the U.S. diplomatic corps. The diplomatic corps was very much embattled against President Trump previously, so it goes back to a much more harmonious relationship. The speech itself really presented the world in a struggle, in the U.S., in a struggle against authoritarianism. And much of the speech was dedicated to countering the challenges posed by Russia and by China, and reaching out to allies and really commending allies abroad. But also, as compared to American speeches of the past, there was an element of humility there, an element of needing to look at home. President Biden emphasized the need for U.S. to lead, not only in now new actions that it will take or re-enhancing its partnerships, but also by strengthening democracy at home, by being a better and more democratic country.
And you said reaching out to allies. Well, we know that the Trump administration did cause a lot of concern among allies here in Europe. So do you think the speech is going to restore trust in the U.S.?
The speech is a first step in a new relationship between Europe and the United States. It's absolutely important for the Biden administration to set groundwork, to say, look, we are going to be cooperating with Europe. We're rejoining the Paris climate change agreement. We are re-entering the World Health Organization. Together, we're going to solve some trade challenges. It's an extension of a hand. But Europe, in many ways, has been offended by the U.S. over the past 4 years, and it won't be automatic, this reset in transatlantic relations. But this, as a first step forward, is very important.
You mentioned Russia. Well, we saw that Joe Biden did send some very clear warning shots in his speech to Russia. And at the same time, we saw the EU foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, in Moscow today, really struggling to take that tougher line while trying to keep dialogue open. So how well do the U.S. and Europe actually line up on how to approach Moscow in this case?
I'd say there's some discord right now between the U.S. approach to Russia and China and the U.S. and the European approach. We see President Biden very clearly say that the U.S. will not tolerate election interference or cyber attacks or poisoning of Russian citizens in the way we've seen in Salisbury and against Navalny, and a clear denunciation of the actions taken against Navalny. At the same time, you see Borrell not canceling his trip, not being able to make headway on this, and the court cases and attacks on Navalny continue. So you see a much tougher approach from the U.S. on these issues, and Europe taking a more of a back seat in this. There are discussions, of course, in Brussels, and they will continue on this question. But really, the U.S. is taking a much more forceful line this week in particular. And I think we'll see a similar pattern with China, when you have President Biden clearly saying that the U.S. is going to continue being very tough on China and does see the need to address various threats to prosperity and security that China can pose. On the other side, you see President Macron in a recent speech say that Europe wouldn't necessarily follow the U.S. on this. So we do see divergences here between the U.S. and Europe approach to these big adversaries.
Just quickly, Kristine, despite those divergences, do you think that Europe will stand shoulder to shoulder with the U.S., even if there are differing opinions?
I think we're headed to a much closer transatlantic relationship, or I hope that's where we're going. The U.S. and Europe have a very strong security partnership, and there has been commitment, express commitment from both sides to that continuing. We still need to deal with the 2% and NATO spending questions. Those aren't going to change. But I think on a bunch of big shifts, many of the conflicts of the past 4 years will be solved. So, yes, it's not immediate. This speech yesterday was a first step, but I think we're headed to closer transatlantic relations in spite of the differences and divergences we might still have.
Kristine Berzina with the German Marshall Fund in Brussels. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.